We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Choose Positive Living, right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My guest today, a repeat guest, is Kate King. We're going to be talking about her new book, Mend or Move On. Now, we debated whether this should go under mental health or choose positive living, and it's a little of both. But everything we do in life is a choice, and it's understanding what our choice is. Kate King is a licensed professional counselor and author of Mend or Move It On, a guide to healing or leaving toxic relationships. We need to leave those behind. It helps people navigate the complexities of harmful relationships, from manipulative partners and domineering bosses to abusive parents and family dysfunction. She explores the controversial yet increasingly necessary decision to choose estrangement or non-contact with toxic family members, including parents, and why this step is so essential for the emotional safety and the long-term well-being. King clarifies what truly defines a toxic relationship versus one that has just simply run its course, while outlining 7 common traps that people get stuck in damaging dynamics. She offers practical tools for breaking free from the psychology and the emotional harm, releasing guilt, setting boundaries that can actually strengthen healthy connections. She also distinguishes independently from codependency, shares communication strategies to avoid trigger conflict, and emphasizes the role of curiosity, compassion, everyday kindness in building relationships rooted in dignity and mutual respect. As she notes, no one should settle for a bond that diminishes their autonomy or well-being, because toxic is toxic and everyone deserves to grow in a healthy connection. She is a licensed professional counselor, a board-certified art therapist of nearly 20 years of experience in individuals heal their wounds and can positively contribute to the evolving collective. Her work incorporates dynamic synergy of brain and nervous system sciences, psychology teachings, spiritual practice, art therapeutic, creative expression to provide unique, effective approach to healing and personal relationship. She's also a podcast host, an entrepreneur, an award-winning author of The Radiant Life, and you hear about that in the last show, psychologically self-help guide to cultivating deep, healthy, empowered life, and The Authentic Mother, a creative-based companion book for parents. She lives with a husband and 2 children in Mission, Colorado. So good to have you back here again, love. Another book under your belt here. Toxicity. You know, right now we're seeing a great deal of that in the world and in politics, and it kind of seems to be finding its way in the pores of others. And it's how do we choose positive living when our mental health is being so strained by outside elements, never mind the ones that we're dealing with day to day? Welcome back, love.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you for another conversation.
hmm So how do we stay positive when our minds are constantly being bombarded by toxicity on the outside, on the inside, all around us? You know, how do we kind of pull that thread and go, enough is enough. I want to take a different direction.
Yeah, well, the sort of paradoxical quality about this is that it's probably the toxic relationships in your life that are diminishing your ability to stay positive. And
hmm
so trying to keep your head above water when you're in relationships that are abusive or dysfunctional or just misaligned and unhealthy for you, it creates sort of a friction where you're working against yourself. And so you
mm
have less energy to do the things you want to do. You have less patience for some of the other more frustrating things in the larger collective. You don't get to show up as that radiant being that we talked about in our last conversation with the Radiant Life Project.
hmm
So I think people really underestimate how much their relationships impact them for better
hmm
and for worse, really depending on that quality. And if you think about all the relationships you have in your entire life, from large to small. You have your really intimate people, you have your acquaintances, everyone in between, but each of those relationships is like a tether that connects you
Yeah.
energetically to that person, their impact on you, what they're bringing into the relationship, how you feel when you're with them. And so you kind of compile that at the end of the day and you see if you
Mhm.
come out in the green or in the red. And that's a really good, honest way to take stock of your relationships and really see if they're contributing to a happy, healthy life or to a depleted, exhausted, and burned out life.
Are you energetically drained at the end of the day? If you are, is it something you're doing or is it the people you're around? Do you look forward to seeing someone because they energize you and uplift you? Are you scared to be around someone because they know they're a piranha or a Death Eater from Harry Potter's and sucking the life out of you? And we become so polite and politically correct, we don't know how to put boundaries on ourselves and say, no, I just can't be around that person. However much I may love them, where they're at right now is draining me, and there's no point in me going down that road as well.
Sure. Well, and for some people, you've been in relationship with them for
Mm,
so long, maybe for your entire life if they're your family, or for a
yeah.
long time if they're a longtime business partner or spouse or best friend, that your actual baseline has changed. You have
Yes.
learned how to tolerate more dysfunction because being in contact with them so regularly has actually diminished your ability to see how unhealthy it is and to notice how straining it is on you. So sometimes it's our closest relationships that are the culprit, but
Mm,
we overlook that because it's so inconvenient to ask those difficult questions about our closest relationships because often that comes with really big changes and really difficult conversations and sometimes even endings.
yes. Why are we so scared to have those difficult conversations? I think we tap dance around certain people and conversations. So either we don't want to upset or we don't want a confrontation. We want a conversation, not a confrontation. Um, we want to be able to express how we feel, but we're scared to express that. Is somebody going to belittle it, demean it, throw it back in our face, or ignore it? We're so scared of those interactions now because of the reactions that we get back from toxic people.
Right. Well, and honestly, I don't know that a lot of us are taught how to communicate
Mm,
really well.
hmm.
Communication is a skill, and it's a layered skill that really requires a lot of practice and a lot of nuance. And so most of us can communicate relatively decently on the surface as long as things are pretty status quo. But when you have those contentious experiences or those really dysfunctional relationships that need deep attunement and conversation, sometimes people are afraid to have the conversations because they know kind of in their heart or in their gut that it won't go well and they don't
Yeah.
know how to handle that. So the discomfort of potentially a conversation that goes off the rails is what inhibits them from even starting it.
I know from my own experience with toxic people that I found conversing verbally would be immediately combative. So I chose to write a letter, a note, or whatever the case was. And, sometimes we need to write to vent, and then we can filter or delete it. We've got it off our chest. And sometimes we really need to express something to someone, and writing it, rereading it, rewriting, rereading, until you get to a thing where it's not an attack. It's just an observation how you feel when around that person or things that they do that cause a trigger, and how to write it in a way that they can read it and hopefully digest it before they react. But it can sometimes be the buffer or even open up to an actual conversation.
It's a great idea, and I love that you do that. I think for most people, that's a really healthy tool.
Hmm.
The only place where I would caution it is if you're dealing with a type of toxic person who is actually dangerous and who might twist what you're writing,
Hmm.
somehow use it against you in the court of law or in
Hmm.
some other vicious way. It's always good to be careful not to put things in writing for reasons like
Right.
that and give people ammunition to use against you. So I say that, just as the caveat. But I think overall, generally, even if they don't receive your letter well, for you to write it and to feel proud of it, to
Hmm.
feel like you were clear and you said what you wanted to say, that can sometimes provide all of the peace of mind that's really necessary for you to know that you did your best.
Right.
Because ultimately, if a relationship is going to be repaired, it's going to take both people coming to the
Yes.
center and being accountable and being curious about the other person's perspective and really willing to own their part and apologize and move forward together. And that's not always the case when you're working with someone who's really toxic. So if
Mm.
you can move forward knowing that you've done everything possible, that's where I find people can cut ties and move
Yes.
along and have a sense of peace, knowing that
Mm.
they didn't leave anything left unsaid.
And let's face it, if you're talking with a psychopath or a narcissist, no reasoning is ever going to work. There, for a narcissist, it's always you. It's never them. There is no such thing as called accountability. There isn't. They're incapable of doing so because everything is that you say to them is an attack on them. You're out to get them, and there is no accountability of what they've done to you or how they've made you feel. Really, quite honestly, it is cut ties when you realize that you're with somebody that's a narcissist or a sociopath, you're a psychopath. You need to look at this and go, this is unhealthy. I need to place value on myself and get out of there, before it gets too fast. But so many people around people like that are trying to either fix them or trying to like, why can't I get my point across? So, or feel guilty because now suddenly they feel upset
Mhm.
because you're upset because you've made them feel upset that you
Right.
start feeling guilty and it's a whole different emotion. So we really need to kind of step back and take stock of who is this person I'm with or I'm around. And, are those narcissistic tendencies, are they just wounded and coming from their own trauma? Are they out to really want to hurt because they feel better on that? We really need to kind of do our own due diligence in a way.
And there's no shame in asking for help from a
Yes.
clinical professional because when we're really looking at does this person have a mental illness or a
Mm,
psychological disorder, the average person isn't supposed to know what that means or what the
right.
diagnostic criteria for that is. And oftentimes, if you do feel like you've been in relationship with someone who has those really detrimental qualities that could be linked with personality disorders,
Hmm.
psychopathy, or sociopathy, you probably need some counseling for yourself to
How
help.
would you handle it otherwise? We
Right.
don't know, right?
So I always recommend that if a person is on this brink of potentially cutting ties with someone they've been very close to and they feel like they've been abused by or really harmed by, that if they go to their own counseling or psychotherapy, do their own healing work and allow their therapist to guide them in helping to understand
Mm,
truly how dangerous is this person? How misaligned is this
yes.
person? Are they a narcissist or are they really just, traumatized and wounded? Like, and
Hmm.
oftentimes, honestly, narcissistic personality disorder comes from its own wounds. I've
Yes.
never met or worked with anyone who had that personality disorder who didn't have their own trauma. So I think it is really an unhealed person perpetuating that with their own defenses that come out as narcissism, which is still terrible to live with, right?
Yes.
Sometimes knowing that and having a psychotherapist guide you through identifying that, yeah, this
Mm.
person you're relating to is not healthy and does not have the capabilities for the kind of relationship that you need.
If somebody's going through trauma and then through the course of your own therapy, you're able to say, I recognize your trauma. I really would love you to seek help. And that person doesn't really realize that it's the trauma that's causing the reaction. But now, okay, you've pointed it out. I'm willing to go and get help. They're generally trauma-based people of something that's happened to them. But I find, the narcissism comes from denying that trauma and that it's still everybody else's fault. And so you've got people that I recognize there's a problem and I need help, and they will go and get it. And the people that like, nope, it's not me, it's you. There's nothing wrong with me. It's the rest of the world. And you really can't help people who are in that state of thinking.
Right. And if you pay attention to a person like that, you'll see that they have burned bridges everywhere.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Lost a lot of family members. They've lost friendships. Maybe they've gone through several marriages. Maybe they can't hold down a job. There's evidence that it's more than just their relationship with you.
Mm.
And in some ways, that can be really supportive for a person who's trying to break free because
Mm,
people can often fall into one of the seven traps that I talk about is false ownership, where
hmm.
people can think it's my fault that this
Yes.
relationship is not going well. It's my fault that this person's always upset with me. It's my fault we have this dynamic, but it can't be all your fault,
No.
right? And if you've been led to believe that it's all your fault, that's a manipulation tactic by an
Hmm.
unhealthy person who's not willing to look at themselves.
Right. Yeah, an injured person that, finally comes to terms with the fact I'm wounded and I want to do something about it, it has been coming from the state of wound, but now they realize they'll take ownership of it. I've got another genre called Your Health is Your Choice. And we've got the mental health awareness. And all of it is that when we're aware what the problem is. It's up to us to seek whatever guidance or whatever help we need in order to repair it, in order to be able to move on, right? And, mend it or move on. And that's the point. If we don't take ownership, how can anyone help us? Because we really need to take ownership and say, I do need help in this department.
Right. And the way that the human psyche works is we will develop all different protective mechanisms throughout life based on the curveballs that life throws at us. And some of them are healthy and some of them
Mhm.
are really maladaptive and unhealthy, but they're all there that serve as protective mechanisms. And so if you can see people's defenses as like misguided child parts of them,
Yeah,
they're trying to protect them, you can have a little bit more compassion and sympathy for them while still remaining apart and protecting yourself from them. Because if they are caught in the web of their own protective mechanisms to the point where they're flooded by victim consciousness, they're unwilling to take accountability, they're only projecting blame and accusation, that is not a productive, fertile ground for healing and repair. That is not workable.
yeah,
We will never be able to have an inch of growth with a person like that until they can do whatever layers of their own work they need to soothe the protective mechanisms that have arisen inside of them and to really be able to meet themselves at the level of their wound, which might be so intolerable for them that they refuse to go there for their entire life.
right.
They would
Yes.
rather die this way and lose a
Yeah.
relationship than look at that wound. And
Yeah.
that's their choice. And so we have to allow people to choose their own path.
I refer to that as the sunny side of the street. Here is the darkness that you're in. Across the street are all the people that can help you, but you've got to get onto that road in order to be able to receive the help along the way. And I know for some people, stepping out into the street can be very, blinding when you're coming from the dark. Walk on the shady part of the road until you feel comfortable. But we can't go into the darkness to bring you out. The invitation is for you to come so that we can help you in the light. And that's what a lot of people who are wounded are waiting for. They're waiting for someone to go into the darkness to pull them out.
Mhm.
And that has to be your choice. That has to be your free will. That has to be your desire to want to come out of it. And very often we see wounded people, traumatized people, are so easily manipulated by the people that won't take accountability because they look at them as easy prey.
Absolutely. And often for those people who are in the shadows, they're not really always looking to come to the light. Sometimes they're looking
Mm.
to ensnare you and bring you into the shadow
Yes,
with them so that
yes,
they can sort of collude with you in the shadows and avoid accountability together
yeah.
and have you corroborate their own story, right? Which is convenient for them because then they never have to be in the light and they never have to
Mm,
look at themselves. And so that's sort of a dangerous trap that a lot of these really toxic people do is they lure you into their narrative and their darkness and their story to the extent where you get incredibly confused and lose yourself.
yeah, exactly. I used to refer to that as the ruler. Yes, I'm a ruler, not a centimeter person, inches and a foot. But I would say that, the people that were kind of 6 to 12 inches were people that had stepped into positivity, had stepped into accountability, are feeding the possibles, right? And you have your 4 5s that are in that recovery. They've made a choice to leave that darkness, and they're 4 5 moving towards that positivity. But your 1 2 3 are the piranhas. and they go after the 4 5s. They've just got enough energy to feed them, but not so much that they can be rejected by them. So I think it's very, very important when we're in our healing phase, when we're going through that phase of leaving things behind or facing what we need to face, of who is around us and being very, very selective.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. I really like that.
I've been the 4 to 5, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the farther you get from the one, two, or
Mm,
three, the safer you are, and the
yes,
more you attract safe, supportive people and healthy
exactly.
relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the thing though, if we have chosen to invest in ourselves and heal our own wounds and find that courage to walk away from that toxicity, because misery loves misery, insecurity goes after insecurity. It's just that with us the vibration what we're on. And you'll find that people who had a bad boss, a bad boyfriend, bad parent, it's all in the same frequency. When we're willing to change the dial and change the frequency, I'm like, no, I'm not going to accept that anymore. I want to go down a different path. Well, we have to maybe even sometimes be completely solo unto ourselves, other than the people that are helping us, until we are strong enough to reject those other people without feeling being sucked in.
Oh, absolutely. And it's such a misconception too that people think if you had a healthy family, if you had a healthy
Mm,
childhood, you shouldn't have these problems, right?
hmm
That's not necessarily always true, right? That
hmm
not a lot of the time it is the people who have the really unhealthy families and unhealthy childhood that end up doing a lot of this work. But
hmm
people who come from a healthy childhood and a healthy family still do this work because of the world and the
Yes,
toxicity
yes,
in the world. So
yes.
having a healthy family can only insulate you to a degree.
Mm,
And then you have to meet the rest of the population. And if you've had a very healthy family, you may not have the skills to know how to deal with really
exactly.
dysfunctional people. And so when you meet your first unhealthy specimen, they seem so alien to you that it's
Hmm
really easy to get ensnared by them because you probably have a lot of trust in people and you probably have a
hmm
positive outlook. So it really
hmm
isn't better or worse, one side or the other. But the important piece to remember is that we always have autonomy. We always have the power
mm,
of choice. And no matter how entrenched we are in a relationship, we are absolutely never stuck. There are always opportunities
yeah.
to break free.
And there again comes from that desire to be willing to seek it out or willing to take that step or repivot. And that I think that there's an awful lot of people that almost feel guilty. But I didn't have a rocky childhood. I had a good one, and I kind of feel guilty that I don't have a trauma. You know, I feel obligated to help everyone else because I had it so good. But as you said, if you're not prepared, if you haven't got the skills and the tools and the boundaries in place, it's so easy in your tent to help others for them to become the piranhas and suck the life out of you. So we do need to know those skills and also
Mhm.
not have guilt if you've been the lucky one to grow up in a loving family.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I don't think anything positive comes from comparative suffering. That's
No,
the
no.
terms that Brene Brown talks about a lot is,
Mm,
comparing whose suffering is worse and whose childhood.
mm,
It's just not helpful
no.
because where we all are today is really what we're working with.
Hmm
And so suffering and feeling guilt about not suffering enough, it's almost like survivor's guilt, right? Like
Yes, yes.
feeling guilt about somebody else died, but you're still here, it doesn't make that person any more alive. It
No.
just makes you diminished, right?
Yes.
So I think it's really important that we really claim our mindset around these things and try to have a clear perception of what we believe in and why. What are we shining out into the world and how are we contributing to our relationships and to that ripple effect that extends beyond all of us? Because really, that's where we impact the most change.
Mm. The mend or move on is that you can only spend so much time in trying to mend a relationship, whether it's with family, spouse, bosses, people. Um, if it looks like it's not going anywhere, then it really is time to move on. But ultimately, we need to mend ourselves
Mhm.
so that A, we don't attract them, or B, they don't have an effect on us anymore.
Yeah, I call it the mend or move on tipping point or
Hmm
point because it's a little bit like a fork in the road, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's a big decision, especially if it's family estrangement or divorce, right? Or business partnership splitting up. These are not small choices to make. And so sometimes people will feel almost paralyzed or frozen at that choice point because they're so overwhelmed by the magnitude of the decision. And maybe it's been building for a long time. It probably has if it's
Yeah.
gotten to that point. And maybe they've been avoiding it or unconscious to it because it's been, really, bothersome to them, but
Mm.
inconvenient really to deal with. But what I have found is that relationships that have dysfunctional dynamics, they're just not sustainable. They do come to this mend or move on choice point at some
Yeah.
point.
At some
And
point. Mm-hmm.
sooner or later, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
we're really asked to be courageous and to just
Yes.
look it in the face and really ask yourself, get more honest with yourself than you've ever been about is this healthy for you or not? Can this continue or not? And it's like you've said, even if you do decide to move on from the relationship, there's a damage control process that
Mm-hmm.
you need to do to take care of yourself. It's like bandaging yourself up after there's been a wound because you've detached yourself from someone who's been harmful or taking
Yeah.
energy or taking, your life force from you. And that does have a recovery time and it hits the nervous system really hard. So
Yes.
people will
Yes.
feel extremely burned out. And because the body tends to be
Mm-hmm.
a little slower to catch up than the mind, it can take years to heal from a really unhappy relationship, and that's okay. It's an opportunity to be really kind to yourself and have grace with yourself like you would if you had a sick child or
Mm-hmm.
puppy that you were nursing back to health. If you could treat yourself that way, that's the best way that you can mend yourself and move on into a direction where you can
Mm.
repeat that dynamic again in other places.
I want to point out, taking years to get out of it doesn't mean you're going to be suffering during those years. It's just that it may take some time for you to find your own strength, find your own abilities, find your own essence. And you'll do kind of like the cha-cha-cha, like kind of a little couple of steps forward, a step back, until you get into a rhythm that you feel, I am now in rhythm of life. But there will always be something that will come up that will be either a red flag or a reminder or a situation that you have to face again. And that then becomes the mark of how far you've come. But
Mhm.
I'm 71. Um, my relationship with my ex was 25 years ago over. We are fine now in the sense that I see him around the family, walked our daughter down the aisle and this and that. But the damage that he did is still with me because it damaged the nerve endings to such a point that they've only recovered up to a certain point. But that doesn't mean I'm unhappy. And that doesn't mean I'm not in essence of myself and at home with myself. It just means that there are some things that when it does damage you, you may never get full recovery of.
Mhm.
And that's okay because it really ultimately, what do we look for after that? We look for our peace, right?
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's true. We can sometimes have irreversible damage
Mm-hmm.
of the way we give our hearts away, we give our trust away, and we get really intimate with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the many lessons here in this life. And
Yes.
I think about these relationships, they meander, sometimes they end, and it's like a treasure map where sometimes, there's a mountain to climb or a swamp to traverse, but there's also little embedded gifts or
Yes.
or guides along the way. And so I like to remind my clients about this when they're in the healing process after
Mm-hmm.
ending a relationship like this, because, like you said, it's not always hard and it's not always
No.
painful. Sometimes you get to meet parts of yourself
Yes. Yes.
you forgot about or you never even met. Like, I
I
know
didn't know
that,
I could do that. I didn't know I
right?
could be that, and
Yeah.
I allowed the choice to explore, to be wondering of who am I now I'm not in that.
Right. And I know that for me, when I disentangled from really unhealthy, toxic family members that had been a heavy, heavy weight for decades,
Hmm.
I found out that I'm really funny. I have a sense of humor And I was never allowed to really show
Mm,
that. It was always a very serious, sort of uptight, very protected stance that I had to hold. But once I was free of those domineering people, I was able to meet that part of myself, my sense of
hmm
humor, and even my husband, who I've been with for 24 years, and he knew me when I was entangled with these people and when I disentangled and
hmm
then ultimately broke free. And even he was like, what is this funny part of you that I've never seen before? This lightness, this playfulness, like this aspect of you that is okay with taking risks and putting out a little funny statement and seeing if people laugh or even laughing at yourself, right? Because when our nervous system is in a state of trauma and
Yes.
fear and protection, things like humor go by the wayside. That is not an aspect of survival, right?
No,
Your
it becomes
body
dark humor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or cynicism, maybe.
Yes, yes.
But I mean, when you're worried about your very survival, even
hmm
if it's in an unconscious way, your body doesn't allow you those liberal feelings of
hmm
lightness and buoyancy. And so it's not until you feel safe that you start to notice some of those things coming into play. And so those are the little gems. Yes,
hmm
it can be sad, and yes, there can be grief, but there can also be these new aspects of yourself that come online, or you learn how strong you are,
hmm
you learn how resilient you've been, and you appreciate the past self who got you here. So I
hmm
think there are a lot of gems to be seen if you're willing to really look at your trajectory as like a linear process that you've worked really hard to achieve.
And remember, linear doesn't mean a straight line. It can zigzag,
Right.
right? It can twirl. It's okay. You don't look like I'm going to be this today and that tomorrow. No, it's another analogy of mine is that for about 8 years in the last aspect of my marriage, I went into the dark. I'm a very spiritual person, so my soul was feeling shattered and it went into the dark. So the outside of me is functioning. Everybody thinks everything is all right. The inside of me has retreated. And I could see the light over there beckoning me to come out, and I didn't want to. I felt safe in here. Eventually, it was I need to come out. That light's getting bigger and calling. When I got out there, it was so bright, like too bright. And I felt shadows were chasing me. Instead, I realized it was the darkness shaping the light, contouring it into being. Now I am so comfortable in the dark, for I am the light. And when I go into the dark, in that light, I see what it is I need to know. And I'm not afraid of it. It's not a place of escape. It's not a place of terror. It's a
Mm,
place of peace. But you have to take the journey along to do that. And it register each of those moments that you go through, because there's going to be a time where you're at a crossroads and you don't know where you're going, and you look over your shoulder and you go, my God, look how far I've come. I
right.
could be a bit adventurous here. I could go down that road for a while. It doesn't work out. I could always go back over that road. And don't be so like it's got to be correct. Be
Mhm.
exploratory, because that's how we discover the humor. I'm
Yeah.
quirky, right? I'm very quirky. So it's okay to be you. And if people don't like who you are, that's their prerogative. They don't need to be around you.
Right. And right now, the world is a polarized place.
Oh,
And
very.
so, I don't think that we can be building our inner sense of strength and health based on what other people really
Mm,
see in us.
no.
It's really about knowing yourself at this point. And I like your analogy of going into the dark. I call that cocooning, kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
getting into your cozy place because we need to restore. We're
Yes.
recording this right now in December, and right now all of the trees outside are hibernating.
Yes.
What they're doing, they're going inward, they're restoring, they're resting. But because we're humans, we don't think those cycles apply to us, and we think we're just
Oh, they do.
on all the time and
Yeah.
hustling, right? To the point where inevitably people crash, whether it's
Yes.
burnout or a health issue
Mm.
or even death, right? But ultimately, I think if we can honor the cocoon when it needs to, when it's asking us to retreat and not be afraid of that darkness, and maybe take tools into the darkness with us, like a therapist,
Yes.
like a flashlight, like a
Yes.
journal, ways
Yeah.
to know ourselves, ways to have comfort. Then when we are ready to emerge into the light, we will come out rejuvenated and equipped
I'm
and
prepared. I'm prepared. And the thing is there is no one size that fits all. Some people they need a therapist. continuously. Some people, oh, I can do it through yoga, I could do it through meditation, I can do it through journaling. There is no one size. You've got to do your own exploration of what works for you.
Mhm.
What works for me is headphones and music, giving my brain something to do in the background mundanely because I have ADD, so it's got to be active, and then just listening to the music and which resets me. It kind of recalibrates me and it calms me down and it has me recenter myself. Sometimes a walk in nature or even being around my grandkids is a different frequency, but it's also one that to uplift. We need to find out for ourselves what makes us feel safe and what lifts us up and brings us out, and where do we need to go when we're feeling threatened without getting jilted. And yes, we can have a therapist that can help us with various techniques that we can apply, right? Learn to what it is that fits you. But if we're not willing to participate in our own healing and make those discoveries, trial and tribulation, we're always going to be in conflict with ourselves. We've got to be willing to explore with the help on our own, but willing to explore what it is that's going to make us feel centered and calm and at home with self.
Right. And I call that the integration process
Mhm.
because so much, whether you're learning from a therapist or from a book like mine or a show like this,
Mhm.
there's a difference between hearing it and understanding it and kind of
Yeah.
nodding your head along versus practicing it and doing the experiential techniques and feeling into the body and asking yourself the hard questions and processing through dialogue with other people or even in your journal with yourself, because that's where the layers end up getting integrated. And it's not just theoretical, it's not just a concept, but it's actually becoming woven into the fibers of your being. And that's how
Hmm.
we grow. And that's how we
Yes.
transition from this version of self to that version of self, where we're actually a different person. Right. And maybe you're listening or you're watching this and you're thinking, gosh, I don't know if I would even recognize the version of myself from 5 years ago. I've changed so much, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're thinking, gosh, I haven't changed in a long time, and maybe it's time.
Time. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm 71 and I can look back literally at decades, right? And looking at each different decade, because we all have many chapters in our book of life, right? And I so wish I was who I am today, 30, 40 years ago. It would have been a totally different dynamic. But I was the people pleaser. I'm not a recovering people pleaser. I'm a recovered people pleaser. It's like if I can't please you, that's your issue, not mine. I'm going to share myself as far as I want and retreat when I don't feel either reciprocated or feel it's threatened. It, Investing in yourself and taking this journey and making that discovery is the very best thing you could do for you and for the people around you.
Yes, because they're watching and they're picking up on your energy, and there is that
Yes,
ripple effect. But
yes.
I think my husband had said something similar to me about the family members who I ultimately disentangled from. And he said something similar, like, I wish we had done this years ago. I
Hmm.
wish we had done this before our kids were born so that they weren't in the mix.
Yeah,
And I feel really strongly that sometimes some things have to happen so other
yeah,
things can happen,
yeah.
right? Like, we
Yeah, the
can't,
domino effect.
yes, like you can't always be ready
No.
for what you can see in hindsight would have been at
Yes.
a convenient
Oh, yeah.
time.
Perfect hindsight, right?
Right. I think sometimes we actually have to go through those
Hmm.
really difficult experiences for as long as it takes. And sometimes it takes longer than we want it to, but we have to bolster ourselves for really
Hmm.
big growth spurts like this. And that means sometimes trying everything that you possibly can,
Hmm.
people pleasing until it makes you sick, bending over backwards for people until you're shaped like a pretzel. Like you have to learn
Been
these
there, done
lessons.
that. Yeah,
Right? You have to actually learn these lessons, and you could not have come out the other side where you decide, I don't do that anymore, unless you have the contrast of knowing how it feels to have
exactly.
done it.
You've got to go through the process. Another analogy I have is that I used to be the hare. I'm a visionary. I see everything in completion. I know exactly who's going to enjoy it and I want to build it. Let's do it. Let's do it now. Right? And now I've become the tortoise. And by being the tortoise and slowing down and taking my time, I've absorbed more life and truth and beauty or even darkness along the way because I'm present. I'm not rushing. I'm still a visionary, but I'm a stationary visionary. Like I can stop and look and see what's right in front of me and not rush to take it to the finish line. And it's so much more peaceful and less stressful. But I had to be the hare to actually understand and appreciate the tortoise.
Yes. Do you find that when you were in the experience of being the hare, that was a more mental, psychological process, but not so embodied, and maybe the tortoise is a more embodied
Mm.
experience?
Yeah, I mean, because I am a visionary, so I see things in completion and I know how people are going to feel, and I would jump to that experience, a lot of it because that's how I wanted to feel
Mm.
and not how I was feeling. So, like, if I make everybody else feel like that, am I going to feel like that? Right. And now it's sitting with my feelings, and those feelings aren't dark and consuming anymore. They're peaceful. But a lot of it is I'm selective with my time and who I give my time to. And I love being alone, where I used to be lonely.
Those two things are very different.
Very.
I think that's one of the aspects that keeps people stuck at that mend or move on choice point
Mm,
is a lot of people are afraid to be alone because they don't realize the beauty in
yes.
solitude and in enjoying the company you keep when you're with yourself because
Hmm.
maybe they're caught in the trap of codependency
Yeah.
or maybe they've never been alone and so it terrifies them. So that is something that I think people have to reckon with if they're going to really break free is it's possible that I might have a period of aloneness. It's possible that I might even be lonely.
Hmm.
It's still worth it to
Oh,
try to
yes.
cultivate something healthier, right? And
Yeah.
that's sometimes what keeps people frozen. But ultimately, I think it's a really important piece to face.
I think it's only when you're in the loneliness or aloneness that you become a selective of what energy is around you.
Mhm.
You learn to read the energies. You learn to know which situations, which type of people, which this and which that is good for your energy or which is bad. And so that you can make your choice then of what you're going to navigate. Why am I going to go down that path when I know that it makes me feel uneasy or I feel drained? When I could go down that path and feel uplifted and therefore uplift others along the way.
Yeah, you start to notice the red flags both
Mm,
in yourself and in others. And those are different things. Like if you notice that you keep being attracted to unavailable men, right? That's a
mhm.
pattern. And there's just something about one after another. And you start to notice that and say, I'm going to stay away from, men who are non-committal or who
Yes.
don't call me back, right? That would be an external piece. But the internal piece is noticing your own patterns, which is like, every time things get hard, maybe I eject or I run away, or I have a tendency to avoid, or I have a tendency to overshare, or all of these patterns. So, really differentiating which are the aspects outside of you and which are the aspects inside of you, and then learning how to chart the green light course instead of
Mhm.
following those red flags.
And that green light course is, first and foremost, we've got to learn that we are enough from the inside out.
Mhm.
Life will never make you happy from the outside in. It will always leave you wanting more because it's based on consumerism. And it's like you'll only be happy if you look like this, if you buy this car, if you dress this way, if you wear this makeup, blah, 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 you'll only be happy if. And when we stop buying that crap and we go inside and go, but where is my equilibrium? Where do I feel at home? When am I in my own essence and I feel at peace with it? Then you really understand that your true enrichment and abundance lies within and attracts without.
Yes. Yeah, what you're speaking to, I've heard referenced as the hedonic treadmill, as
Mm,
sort of like that never-ending, vanishing horizon line of never enoughness and just
mhm,
constant striving and grasping and chasing. And that's what happens when you're seeking something outside of you, right?
mhm.
Because as long as it's outside of you, it will never be enough because
No.
the void of not letting it come from within is so profound that it keeps you
Mm,
grasping and grasping. But as soon as you can connect to something that feels like an anchor inside of yourself, you might notice that what an aspect of you where you would rather have a bad relationship than no relationship.
Yeah.
Now you're like, no, I would rather be alone and happy than have anything other than a good, solid relationship. So your
Exactly.
values start to change
Mm.
when you have that internal anchor and when you stop riding that treadmill of never enoughness.
Well, you said the magic word value. My mum used to say to me, the value you place on yourself is the value you're taken for. And that
Hmm.
actually took me a long time to actually register that. If
Yeah,
I'm putting myself out as less than, I'm going to be received in that way. If I'm putting myself out as I am abundant within, then that is how I'm going to be perceived. But we've got to get there when we feel abundant and enriched within ourselves.
right.
And that's the journey of self discovery. That's the journey of embracing our essence. That's the journey of going, nope, past, closed door. I'll
Mhm.
take the lessons I've learned for it, but I'm not going to take the emotion. And I'm opening up a new door in wonderment and exploration along with the skills and the tools that I've learned and
Mhm.
apply.
Right. And an aspect of toxic relationships is that so often they're actually attracted to people who are grasping in that way, who are looking
Mm-hmm.
outside of themselves, because toxic relationships are sometimes focused on power and control.
Yes.
And sometimes they're focused on that sort of hiding and avoiding the truth. And so,
Mm-hmm.
if they can have someone who is consistent with that narrative, who they can sort of prey upon, someone who doesn't have strong sense of value or strong anchor inside of themselves, it's a lot easier to sort of bring them over into that dark, shadowy side. And so you have to be careful of that if you're in a period of life, which I think we all go in and out of
Mm-hmm.
periods where we're kind of lost. We're not sure who our new self is or what our new chapter, the real strong footing will be. And in those moments of feeling sort of lost and confused, that makes you more vulnerable to toxic relationships that want to prey on that. And so sometimes in life, it's better to just focus on yourself and on your
Yes.
development and rebuilding your own foundational strength before you start to invite relationships in. And
Yeah.
mind you, long-term relationships like families or long marriages or long friendships, sometimes they go through all the seasons of life with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there's a period where you can say to people, I need space for a while because I'm going into my cocoon or I'm in a self-discovery period and I know you're my sister or my best friend or my business partner and I need space from this
Yeah.
relationship right now so that I can find my next chapter.
And if they take that in offense and walk away, which is what I did 25 years ago, um, I had somebody just take offense of that and dump me. And it was my, I don't know, 12-year-old daughter said, oh, thank God. And I went, what? I thought she was my best friend. She said, no, Mum, I've seen her been sucking the life out of you forever. I'm glad that she's gone. And I was unaware of it, right? And and then that kind of became, people will kind of leave your life because you're not of the same frequency anymore. And this is actually something that's very important and a lot of the reason why I hold people back. But their family, or they're my husband, the devil you know. And whether they're family or not, blood thicker than water, well, no, actions are thicker than water as far as I'm concerned. And if, family is abusive and family is toxic, you don't need that kind of blood in your life. But for a lot of people, it's like, but how do I leave them behind? And I put out boundaries. I'm sorry, I will not talk to you with that attitude. And so you learn to have, I have a sister that we're chalk and cheese. We speak on one channel. We communicate in that channel. She doesn't come into my world. I don't go into that world because that's where the toxicity of the conflict is. We stay in the channel that we're both mutually comfortable with. And it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you have to leave people altogether. You find different ways if they're willing
Mhm. Yes.
to
Mhm.
resonate with you on a certain channel. If they're not willing, blood or not, they don't have your best interest at heart. And you need to have your best interest at heart.
Right. And that can be
Okay to walk
really,
away.
yes, that can be confusing for people because most of the cultures around the world
Mm,
support family as the
Yeah.
ultimate value and making it work
And
and
safe haven. Yeah.
right, and never
Mm,
abandoning family
mm,
because there is this sanctity to
mm,
it. And only recently, in these recent years, people have started to come out about this and to say,
mm.
I don't want to have an unhealthy relationship with a family member.
Exactly.
I choose the unknown future instead of this known suffering that's
Mm.
familiar from the past,
Or I
right?
choose my family,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
Yeah, and there's a big movement around it right now.
Mm,
I think especially, very loud on social media, very
hmm
loud in politics. There's just
hmm
a lot going on. And so if people who are listening to this are resonating or if this is maybe confusing, I encourage you to find that anchor within yourself in
hmm
terms of finding your own value, the love for yourself that
hmm
prioritizes your health and safety. Because so often when people have really toxic families, they get to a point where it feels like you have to either choose your family or yourself. And if you choose your family, your health is at risk,
Yes.
right? It almost can feel life or death for people.
Yeah.
I know it felt that way for me. And that was one of the hardest things because it's an impossible decision to have to try to disconnect from
hmm
someone you've known all your life who's been an integral aspect of your
hmm
identity. And if you think you might get cancer because of how inflamed
hmm
you are when you're
hmm
around this person, how toxic the energy is, how self-abandoned you are, ultimately, anything is better than that. So if
Yes.
you disconnect from that person and you feel sad, if you feel lost, if you feel untethered, that is better than dying of cancer.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
it is a path worth experiencing and
oh,
exploring.
no, no, just because, no. Um, you know, I'm very emphasize the importance of self, not self-importance, right?
Right.
The importance of self is loving and nurturing you. Self-importance is that delusion that you're more important than anyone else. So there is a difference. We have to put ourselves first because we live with ourselves 24/7 for the rest of our existence. And if we don't look after ourselves, who's going to look after us when we're debilitated? Right?
Right.
So the
Right.
importance of self is there. You must put that your well-being, your psyche, your nerves, your the whole atmosphere of how you feel. If it's feeling shattered, if it's feeling uneasy, if it's feeling depleted or demoralized, beaten down, that is not you looking after you. Saying no, close the door. If this door is ever going to be open again, there has to be some changes, but I'm not willing to accept this from you anymore. Full stop.
Right. And people will respond differently to that,
Yeah.
right? I had people in my experience where they just still continue to be avoidant of it and blaming. And
Mm,
so they continue to be outside of my sphere of connection. There was one person from that unit who did circle back and say, I'm ready to do this work. I'm ready to hear what you're trying to say. I think I understand what I did. There's some pieces I don't understand. Maybe you
hmm
can help me understand. And that you can work with. And now
Yes.
that person is reintegrated with my family, and it's beautiful. It's not perfect, but
No,
it's beautiful.
but it's recovering. Then you've got, the people that you cut them off and you walk away and they get nasty. And they can be very damning and they can especially with social media, they can start sharing a rumor or doing this and that. And the only statement that you have to have on that is you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to my truth.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And
Because
don't rise to the bait. Mm,
it's not about convincing people to
no.
see your perspective. It's not about talking till you're blue in the face to be understood. Because so many survivors of relational trauma
hmm
feel profoundly misunderstood.
Yes.
So it's an impulse to help people understand and help people see their perspective. But if you're talking to a person who is so ingrained in their avoidance, they're
hmm
never going to hear your perspective. They don't want to understand you. And
No.
so it's a disconnect that will never help your healing. And to say something like your statement, you're entitled to your opinion, I'm
Mm.
entitled to my truth, that's just beautiful because it acknowledges and it also says, I'm not going to participate in this.
Full stop. We've got not to be afraid of the full stops. Like no is a full statement, but a full stop in your tone, in your statement, full stop, not open to negotiation.
Yes.
right? And that comes across in your persona. You don't have to say it with anger or with force. It comes across in the strength of your persona. Full stop, door closed.
Yeah. It's powerful and it's empowering because
Mm,
it shows you a strength inside of yourself that was likely diminished when you were in relationship with that person because of whatever their domineering or their controlling energy that made you self-abandon. And so to stand up tall and to cultivate that empowerment is reclaiming something that you've
yeah.
always had that was really veiled in that relationship.
Yes.
And so unveiling it and letting yourself be free on that level is so deeply healing.
And wonderful. Come on in, the waters are great. Now, we are here at this Christmas period, although the show lives on and people can listen to it any time. But let's address Christmas right now, where people are going to go to family members they don't particularly want to go to, and they feel obligated to go to because maybe, it's you've got an angst with your mum and dad, but there's the grandkids and you don't want to ostracize them. There's all that dynamics that goes there. How do you, as a family or as yourself, set the tone as to what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, when you're going into that family Christmas or whatever is happening there? What tips have you got for some people that they can use this Christmas?
Hmm, it's a good question, and there's so many people asking themselves this as well. And here in
Mhm.
the US, we just had Thanksgiving, and so we have
Mm.
sort of the double whammy of
Yeah.
Thanksgiving and then the Christmas holiday. So, I would say what I see most commonly is that people are not actually communicating. They're not
Hmm.
actually talking to the people that they're worried about spending time with.
Hmm.
They're trying to endure in a
Hmm.
situation and say, let's just get through this. Let's just get to January and then we'll pick up the pieces. And I don't encourage that. I don't
Right.
recommend. I think it would be helpful if before Christmas you could call the person that you're worried about or that you're feeling tense about, and you could say, I'm noticing some anxiety in myself about this. I'm worried that you might say this comment. I'm worried that we might not be okay after 3 days together. I'm worried about the triangulating that happens
Mm.
between the siblings, right? Just communicating it and trying to use I perspective instead of blame, instead of saying,
Right.
you always do this.
Hmm.
Don't do that. But instead say, I feel this. I'm worried about this. A concern of mine is this. And then you'll get to feel into whether that person is actually willing to have a conversation with you
Hmm.
about it or not. And you may not know until you start to have these deeper conversations. If they're willing, it could be really fruitful for the
And
growth.
groundbreaking. Hmm.
And if they're not willing, that's good information. And
And
so
that means you can say no.
it
I'm not
means
coming.
you get to decide, right? So
Yes.
maybe you say, you know what, I'm not going to do this year. We're going to have our own little holiday. We're
Mm.
taking it really easy. Or maybe you say, we will come for one meal, but we're not going to spend the night. And
Hmm.
maybe you say, hey, this year, let's not talk about politics.
Right.
Let's not talk about world events. And you can set some boundaries. And you say, so remember the difference between a boundary and a request is a boundary is expressing what you will do if your
Mm.
edges are crossed. And a request is when you ask something. So you can say the boundary would be, if politics are talked about, I will leave,
Hmm.
right? Versus the request would say, let's not talk about politics.
Right.
And so you can play with the boundaries and the requests, and you can see what feels right for you. Maybe you go without your children. Maybe you send
Hmm.
your children without you. Whatever feels the safest and the most comfortable, and you don't have to have it figured out by this Christmas. Maybe this
Yeah.
year is the first time you try something and you do the first layer, and then next year, or in the subsequent holidays, you continue and you see what feels good. But I would like to take the pressure off that you have to nail it the first time and figure it out.
Exactly. This could just be, the seeding.
Hmm.
You're going in with your boundaries, what you will or will not accept. If they push that boundary deliberately, disrespectively, and they don't honor your boundary, for you to get up and go has already set precedence. Oh, gosh, I pushed it too far,
Right. And you
right?
can say, and it doesn't have to be hateful or angry. You can
No.
just say, you know what, this really doesn't feel good for my nervous system. I'm going to head out. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah.
Right. And it
Exactly.
doesn't have to be a whole thing. It doesn't have to be explosive because so many people fear having that explosive,
Mm,
combustible fight after a disagreement. That only happens if you participate in it. So even if the other person seems explosive, you can just say, I love you and I'm gonna go home.
Now, here's another question around the children. You've got family members that will play the kids off against the parents,
Mhm.
right? How does one handle that?
So I would not involve the kids in it at all. Don't give the kids any responsibility. Sometimes parents will make the mistake of saying, "Don't let grandma say this to you. If grandma says this to you, stand up for mommy. Don't let grandma
Mm-hmm.
talk bad." Don't do that because then you're implicating your children into something
Right.
that's an adult conversation. So I would recommend going directly to the source. So if your mother undermines you in front of your children, I would ask your mother step aside and say, "Hey, mom, that really didn't feel good when you said that. Would you please not say things like that anymore? And if you do, we're going to leave."
Mm.
So really stand up for yourself because so often people cave and they collapse because they don't
Yeah.
want to have the
They
fight.
don't want to disrupt. They don't
Right.
want to be the disruptor. But yes.
Or they say, "I'll talk to her about that later," but then
Hmm.
later never comes. So I
Mm.
find that it's really important to speak to it in the moment because it's fresh in everyone's experience. Whereas if you bring it up 2 or 3 weeks later and you say, "Hey, remember when you said that thing?"
Mm.
She's going to be like, "Nope, I don't remember that at all. I had a jolly old time. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?" It's
Mm.
easier to gaslight you.
And it must be you.
Yes.
Yes, you're right.
So I would talk about it in the moment and I would feel out again if she's willing to talk to you about it, if she's willing to come to the table and work with you or not. And if she is not willing to, that's good information and maybe you handle holidays differently moving forward. Maybe the grandparents don't have access to the grandchildren without your supervision. Maybe
Mm.
they don't do sleepovers anymore,
Mm.
or maybe you are always present and you're kind of guiding the conversation. And that all could be, that's family dependent. For every situation, it's very unique.
And of course, if it's a family that's just caught in the trap of the old rhetoric, what you're doing is guiding them to a new rhetoric because they don't really come at malice, they're just coming from habit,
Hmm.
right? But you know the ones that have that narcissistic self-importance there because they're going to be vindictive and malicious and they're
Yes.
going to be underlining. And there it is. I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable going to putting myself or my children in that situation.
Right. And generationally, parenting has changed. And
Yes.
some people in your generation,
Hmm.
your 70s, are very open to that. And they say to their kids, "Help me understand what we're doing now as parents. Like, I want to
Hmm.
be aligned with you." And those are the grandparents who end up having lots of access to their kids, having an
Hmm.
easy flow. But it's the grandparents who say, "Well, in my day, we
Yes.
did it this way," or "Why don't we do it the way I used to do it?" That kind of rigidity,
Yeah.
it doesn't work with this generation's
It's
parents.
not respecting,
Hmm.
the children and the way they're bringing up the children.
Right.
And yes, and I have three grandbabies, 4.5, 2.5, and a 7 week old,
Oh,
6 week, 7 week old. And I'm very interactive in their life. And now and again my daughter calls me out and mom, don't say that, right? But I also do notice sometimes how the kids play on that and they don't do it to grandma because grandma gives them that look, right? Um, but it is, I understand where she's coming from. I understand how she wants to approach it. May not always agree, but these are her children. If they're on my home and my turf, then it's like Nana is not going to perhaps, knows when there's the manipulation there and when there isn't. And you can tell because they try it, doesn't work, and they move on.
yes.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
knowing it. But I think it's like we can't go in my day, because I look at the way I was raised. I try to bring my children up differently to the way I was raised. My children are bringing up differently to the way they were raised. And it doesn't necessarily mean they were bad the way we were raised. We were raised in the environment of what we knew. And when
Right.
we know better, we do better and we need to respect. My grandchildren may raise their children differently because they felt something was missing and they're growing up. That's the evolution of it. If we're so stuck to right and wrong, it's got to be done my way or no way, then that rigidity is going to cause you to break or break in the relationship. So we've got to be honoring, and we've also got to be, honoring of how a person feels or how they're raising a family. And if we don't honor how that person feels, in that disrespect, we're disregarding them. So why should they be there?
Right. because ultimately the parents are the gatekeepers for
Yeah.
their children. And whether you like it or not, this is their opportunity to raise children.
Yeah.
And so you're right that we have new research now, we have new parenting styles now, we have things we didn't used to have. And these parents, I think many are trying to do better.
Hmm.
It's not an insult to the generations past.
No.
It's evolution, it's progression. And so many children, adult children, want to bring their parents on board with them, and they
Yeah.
want the grandparents to sort of join in the village and be a supportive resource because we do raise children better when we have the support of healthy grandparents. And I think we know
Yeah.
that.
We know that the village,
Grandparents have to.
takes the village to raise the children, and that's how it should be. And
Yes.
that village or that family you have may not always be blood family,
Mhm.
maybe chosen family. We see so many times people adopting other people as grandparents or friends or aunts and uncles. Like um, my family lived overseas. I was the only one here. So I made friends where she had three kids, I had three kids. We would swap kids out. I'd take for the weekend, she'd take. They kind of grew up together. And consequently, at each other's wedding, they've either been bridesmaid or best man, and they're still very much a part of that life because they look at her as auntie and uncle, and these are cousins by
Right.
choice. And so we've got to understand family is how we make it, whom we bring into our fold. And it doesn't have to always be blood family. And we do see so much of emigration and people moving away from family for various reasons. It's okay to create your own family and create
Right.
your own tribe. It really is.
And to create it from that healthy baseline
Yeah.
of having balance and reciprocity, that give and take flow, feeling nurtured by each other and boosted by each other, having the feeling like the relationship is in the highest good of all
Yes.
involved, right? There isn't someone who's large and someone who's small. It's that
Right.
there's an equanimity and equality and balance, and that's how you know that it's healthy.
Back to the analogy of the orchestra, each and every one of this is an instrument that we're in discovery of, and we learn how to play it. And we could be a soloist, beautiful soloist. However, when we join an orchestra, each in our own strength and harmoniously play together, we become transcending. But that orchestra is only as good as each other's participation and contribution. And if we could look at each other as that orchestra, we could become that symphony, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, be proud and stand tall in who you are and what you're contributing, but leave the ego of you're more important than anyone else out of it. You might be the soloist, that doesn't matter. Without the triangulus, that piece doesn't sound right. So we've got to honor each person's role
Right.
and who they are and what they are, not compare, not compete, do not diminish because they don't be has an important job like you do. That just means you've got more pressure. But they where's the CEO without a good janitor? They're in a dirty, tardy place that other people look at the CEO in a different light. The janitor set the stage. So I think we all have to look at each other more as who we are, in the essence of who we are and what we contribute, and not our position in life.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
So here we are, Christmas to New Year. Now, an awful lot of people make New Year's resolutions, right? And, I think a good resolution for the new year would be, I am going to place more importance on self this year. And I am going to do what I need to do with a counselor, with somebody to support and help me in making that discovery of my own beautiful instrument. And
Mhm.
having said that, what do you offer? You've got the books, both books, but what do you offer them in the way of being able to really help them make that discovery of self?
Well, I think everything starts with self and it ripples out from there. And so, in honoring of this new book, my invitation is to be really mindful of how it's rippling out into your relationships this new year.
Mhm.
So often people make New Year's resolutions where they want to eat better or get healthier or get a new job. This year, I would invite people to look at your relationships and really
Mhm.
take stock of which relationships are you maintaining that are thriving and healthy, and which are you maintaining that are unhealthy and soul sucking and just limping along, waiting to die. So, if you find that there's someone in your life that is harming you, that you would do better without, that you feel drained by, I invite you that maybe the new year can be the magnifying lens that helps
Mm,
bring that relationship into greater clarity for you so that you can decide if it is mendable
hmm.
or if it needs to be moved on from.
Right. And it's okay if you can mend it, great, but it requires both participants.
Yeah.
If it's time to move on, that doesn't mean you're leaving someone behind. That's their choice. It means you're moving forward.
And you're freeing them for more aligned relationships as well by removing
Exactly.
yourself from their life. Because if it's misaligned for you, it's
Hmm.
misaligned for them too,
Yeah.
whether they recognize it or not. And so when you say, I am out of here, then you leave a void or a space where they can then either fill that with themselves and their self-awareness, or they can bring someone new into their life that might be a potentially better fit for them too. So it's actually a gift for everyone involved when you leave a relationship behind that's not serving.
And of course, you wrote a book, The Authentic Mother, The Radiant Life, which we did the last show on. And we all want a radiant life. We want to know how to get it. And of course, your book talks about that. The show talked about that. And now, of course, Mend or Move On. But all of these books can be found on Amazon under your name. Kate King, how simple is that? Kateking. But what other services are you offering them, love?
These days, I'm doing individual work globally. So I meet with people in all countries, one-on-one coaching around relationships, around that radiant life, those transitions, being kind of stepping into your power and your next chapter. I also run different types of retreats and workshops. At the moment, things are a little quiet on that front because I'm in the process of bringing this book forward. But
Hmm.
soon there will certainly be different workshops and retreats based on this. So my website, theradiantlifeproject.com, has an events page. You can keep an eye on that page, and that's where I'll post my upcoming events and offerings. And who knows, maybe there will be a workbook that goes along with
Hmm.
this, or different books that, take on different fractals of how to live this thriving, meaningful life that we all want so badly.
So the radiantlifeproject.com. It's Radiant Life Project on Instagram, on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. But she's also got radiantlife.com/podcast where you have your own podcast. Are these ones that you just do on your own or do you interview people as well, love?
So I was co-hosting a podcast for a while. It's a wonderful podcast called Everyday Epigenetics about how epigenetics come into play and our genetic expression isn't
Hmm.
always set in stone like we think.
Hmm.
And then I pivoted away from that podcast so that I could work on sending this book out into the world and
Hmm.
promoting the book. So as of now, I am mostly on other people's shows and having conversations like we are today. And so on that podcast page on my website, you can find all my different teachings, many of my conversations going into deep rabbit holes like we did today on all different
Hmm.
topics.
Without our mental health, we don't have physical health. And if we get attacked physically through an accident or something happening, our mental health needs to be strong to help our physical recover. We need to have good relationship with ourselves in order to have good relationship with others. If we want a quality of life, it starts with us. So we've got to be willing to take that journey of our own self-discovery, of our own beautiful radiant self. We've got to be willing to move on. We've got to be willing to let go. We've got to be willing to embrace. And that requires moving forward step by step, doing what you need to do in order to become that person who is at home completely with self. And it can get there as fast as long, or it could be a lifetime experience. Every experience is a lovely stage that you reach, and then you reach even bigger stages as you grow. Trust me, 71, I know. Been there, done that, I know. So it's all a question of how you invest in yourself. And if Kate can help you get there, either for reading the books or the one-on-one, you're not meant to do it alone. We need the soundboard. We need somebody that can mirror back to us. We need somebody who gives us the tools and the skills to apply. My shows are about listen, learn, and apply. Well, the apply is get the books. The second application is reach out to her. Don't have to be alone. Don't have to do it alone. And you just need somebody who's got your back that can see things differently. And they become your aha moments. Oh, I hadn't seen it from that point of view. Oh gosh, I had a blockage there. Now I'm through it. You've got to take the action, but you need somebody who can show you how to dance the cha-cha-cha. So
Yes.
Thank
Beautiful.
you so much for being with us back here, Kate, and enjoyed seeing you on your next book when you
Thank
come back out again. And folks, it is Christmas time, and well, wherever you're listening to this show, but let us look at these are pivotal moments in time, of coming together. But let's look at life as a celebration in itself, and be willing in gratitude to celebrate every day. And every day we embrace the essence and the beauty of who we are and what we mean to the world. And understand that the more abundant you become, more enriched you become, the more you are a better contributor to what ails us in the world. So we need you to shine bright. We need you to be radiant, because when you are, that means you're shining light for others, and we can all rise up to that higher consciousness. So thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you. It's been such a joy chatting with you.
And Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You
And
as
to
well.
everyone out there, please share the show. Please share the show. Make sure that other people that you may be having a conflict with, right? Share that and say, look, hey, we listened to this, shared some tools. How about we have a conversation? Let the show be the one that breaks the ice. Okay. So until next time, folks, be well, look after yourself, and don't forget you are the light you seek. Bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there, and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration, it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.